He is the medical director of the Oklahoma Stroke and Neurological Institute at Hillcrest Medical Center. Dr. Fridu, hello. Am I saying that right, Dr. Fridu?
Yes.
Good deal. Well, nice to have you on board here. Where are you today?
I am in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Tulsa, that's the home of the Stroke and Neurological Institute at Hillcrest Medical Center, correct?
Yes, sir.
You know, we've talked a lot about the symptoms of stroke here. We know BFAST. We know about, face, arm thing. I don't think we've ever talked in any of my interviews about stroke about what actually happens inside a body when a stroke happens. What happens inside during a stroke?
Well, the medical definition of a stroke essentially is interruption of the blood flow to an area of the brain. That interruption can be in the form of a blood clot that can come from the heart. It can arise organically from the blood itself or come from a neighboring blood vessel. Or it can come because of a blood vessel has ruptured, and usually that's because of uncontrolled high blood pressure or possible aneurysm. And so the symptoms that someone would have are dependent upon what area of the brain has been affected.
I always thought stroke was heart, but actually stroke is in the brain, huh?
Yeah, well, really, we've used the term brain attack to make it kind of synonymous with heart attack, and mainly what is going on is that you have an interruption of blood flow. You can have an interruption of blood flow to your kidneys or to your liver and have an area of significant injury that can occur. The big difference between those organs and the brain is that very special areas in the brain do a variety of different things. And so the right side of the brain controls the left side of the body. The left side of the brain controls the right side of the body. So you can have a small area injury on the right side of the brain, and the left side of the body would be affected. Mm-hmm. So it's just the brain is so complex in the way that it's organized. It makes it very difficult to put a common face on stroke. You can do that with other organs. You can't do that with the brain. And that's why the acronym BFAST is so important, because you can have stroke symptoms that can involve your balance, your eyes, mm-hmm. your face, your arm, your speech, and you can even have a terrible headache, which can be signs of a bleeding stroke. But the key is time. Time is equal to brain. For every minute that the brain is without oxygen, up to 2 million brain cells can be permanently injured. Mm-hmm. So that's why we want individuals to overreact and call 911 right away, because for every minute you can have a devastating effect on the brain, and the best way for us to either reverse that or minimize its effect is by having you in a healthcare environment where you can be properly evaluated and treated. Mm-hmm.
Dr. Fridu, you talked about the internal effects or the internal makings of a stroke. Is there anything external outside the body that can cause a stroke?
Well, there are risk factors that are at our control. 80% of strokes are preventable. So I think that's very important for your audience to know. 80% of strokes are preventable. Mm-hmm. And they're preventable by controlling risk factors. So high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, smoking is an external factor. Mm-hmm. Smoking would double your risk of stroke. With younger patients, younger patient population, there's sometimes genetic predisposition that they may have, plus other environmental factors such as illicit drug exposures. Vaping is a big concern of mine as a healthcare provider, because there's so little that we know about it. But I think we all feel very concerned about what it's going to show within the next several years when it's being researched as aggressively as it is now. Mm-hmm. So by knowing your risk factors can go a very long way towards you controlling the possibility of you having a stroke.
Okay, but by external, I mean, can somebody hit my head, or can I have a bad fall, or something external happens to me and immediately cause a stroke?
If there are individuals that are on blood thinners, and we see this more in the elderly population, and they fall and they hit their head, sometimes they can have bleeding in the brain, and that can cause a stroke. Uh-huh. If someone's in a motor vehicle accident, or we've heard about situations where people had a neck injury, and that neck injury led to tearing of the artery in the neck, and that we use the term dissection, that leads to kind of a compromise of blood flow, and sometimes a blood clot can form in that way. But these are far less common than the risk factors that we have more control over, such as high blood pressure and diabetes and smoking and things of that sort.
Okay. Now, we've talked about BFAST, balance, eyes, face, arm, speech, time. There are 10 other signs of stroke. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Well, you know what, they're all really lumped under BFAST, but you
Yeah.
know, if I were to kind of just quickly go over that a little bit more detail.
Sure.
So balance would be, first of all, stroke is something that occurs suddenly. So stroke equals sudden. It's not something that is going to have an indolent course over a matter of weeks or months. You know, it's going to occur suddenly, where you're going to have a change from your norm, literally at as quick as snapping your fingers. So balance. So if you are falling to one side or you're unable to stand, that would be something that occurs suddenly. That can be a sign of stroke. Eyes, whether you have double vision, loss of vision, or you have blurred vision. Face would be weakness or numbness in one side of your face that is sudden in onset. Arm or appendage would mean that you have weakness or numbness in your arm or your leg that is sudden and different than what you have on the opposite side of your body. S is speech, so whether you have slurred speech or you have an inability to generate speech or an inability to understand speech that is sudden in onset, that is a telltale sign of stroke. And the last is T, which stands also for terrible headache. If somebody has the worst headache of their life, sometimes that can be a sign of a bleeding stroke. And a lot of times those patients may not only just have a terrible headache, but sometimes they have profound confusion, or sometimes they become comatose. And T also stands for time. Time is equal to brain, and that is one of the monikers that, as a stroke neurologist, we use on a daily basis, and I would love for your audience to make sure that they're aware of that. Time equals brain. The sooner you are evaluated, the sooner you can be treated, and hopefully the sooner we can get you back to a full state of health.
How common is a stroke?
Stroke occurs, there's about 800,000 strokes a year. That's about one stroke every 40 seconds. So we've probably been on the phone for about 5 or 6 minutes. So there's probably been somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 or 7 strokes that have occurred during that time. Globally, there's about 13 million strokes a year. By the year 2050, we're going to probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 million strokes in the United States on a yearly basis. But, you know, we're making some inroads when it comes to decreasing the amount of death that is associated with stroke, but it's still one of those situations that is very debilitating. It's the number one leading cause of debilitation when it comes to medical conditions.
Dr. Fridu, can I have a stroke and not know it?
You can. You know, there is a phenomenon called silent stroke, where you have an area of injury in the brain, and that you may not. That may be in an area of your brain where there are no really what we call eloquent areas of the brain. That's not necessarily the most common type, but it is something that really echoes the point of you seeing your primary care physician on a regular basis and trying to manage your risk factors as aggressively as you possibly can to minimize the risk of you having any type of injury to the brain, because for those patients who may have an event that may appear silent, you never know if the next event's going to be silent. The next event may be a devastating stroke.
So then if I have a silent stroke, and I know I've got to let you go here. I know time is, speaking of time, time's coming up here. If there is a silent stroke, then how do I know to to do something?
Well, you know, really, if you have an event like that, you really don't know. But again, I think it gets to the point. People don't typically have an event like that unless they have underlying high blood pressure or diabetes, or they're smokers, or they have a variety of other of the risk factors that you commonly see for patients that have stroke. So if you have those risk factors, then you need to be seeing your primary care physician regularly, not only for stroke but for heart attack. You know, the heart and the brain are exquisitely dependent upon one another. So if you have an area of issue with one, you're likely going to have an area of issue with the other.
What do we want people to know?
Want to know 3 things to keep in mind. 1, 80% of stroke is preventable. 2, be fast in your recognition of stroke, be fast in getting to a healthcare facility, which will hopefully be fast in getting you back to full recovery. And 3, there are chemical and mechanical treatments that are available within the first hours, up to 24 hours of someone who's having a stroke. Please get in. We want you to overreact. Please come in as quickly as you can so you can be evaluated and properly selected if there are treatments that you can be provided. The website is www.strokeawareness.com.
Strokeawareness.com. There we go. Dr. Andre Fredoux with the Oklahoma Stroke and Neurological Institute at Hillcrest Medical Center in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I thank you for some time out. Best to you, sir.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your time.
Dr. Andre Fredoux is the medical director of the Oklahoma Stroke and Neurological Institute at Hillcrest Medical Center. If you want to know more, strokeawareness.com. That's strokeawareness.com. And that will wrap up this edition of Conversation Collage. Thank you for being with us. Appreciate it. We've got more good stuff coming down the line here, and so you keep listening, okay? And downloading and telling your friends and liking and sharing and all that good stuff that comes with podcasts. We will catch up with you next week here on Conversation Collage. Ken Johannesson here. Be good to yourself.